Is your skull, ribs, sternum, and vertebrae. So going through the structures and bones of the skull, we have the frontal bone, and then we have the coronal suture, parietal bone right here, parietal bone. Let me hold it like this. Sagittal suture, occipital bone, lambdoid suture. Let me see if you can see that. There we go. Occipital, lambdoid. Between the frontal and the sphenoid bone, this is the frontosphenoidal suture. The sphenoid is visible from the side of the orbit and the inside of the orbit. That's the same bone. Sphenoid, ethmoid, lacrimal. And you can see the hole where the tears go down, the lacrimal bone. Lacrimal, ethmoid, sphenoid. Nasal bone, vomer runs right down the middle. And then on the sides are the inferior nasal conchae. Maxilla, zygomatic, palatine, magnum or foramen magnum. A foramen is a hole in a bone that a blood vessel or nerve passes through. In this case, it's the spinal cord. And you can also see another view of the zygomatic. See how the zygomatic sticks out? This is the temporal bone. Temporal, sphenoid. Mastoid process. It sticks down like this. Then on the jaw, this is the sigmoid notch. And the jawbone is called the mandible. Mandible, sigmoid notch. All right, going down the vertebrae, there are 7 cervical vertebrae. The top one looks a little bit different. That's called the atlas, or C1 for cervical 1. C1, C2, C3, C4, C5, C6, C7. And what I'm grabbing is the spinous process. The spinous process comes off dorsally. The transverse process comes off the side. Transverse, the spinal cord runs through the vertebral foramen in the middle. The thick part right here that holds the weight is weight bearing. That's the vertebral body. And the cartilage between the vertebrae is the intervertebral discs. On the thoracic vertebrae, each thoracic vertebrae is connected to a corresponding rib. So T1 right here is connected to rib 1, T2, rib 2, T3, rib 3, T4, rib 4, T5, rib 5, T6, rib 6, T7, rib 7, T8, rib 8, T9, rib 9, T10, rib 10, T11 is pointing to rib 11, which is a floating rib, and T12 is on rib 12, which is the final floating rib. After T12 is the lumbar. So that's going to be L1. See how big they are to hold the weight of the body? L1, L2, L3, L4, and L5. Below that are 5 fused vertebrae that make up the sacrum, and below the sacrum are 4 fused vertebrae that make up the tailbone or coccyx. You can also see those hip. So in your pelvis, you can see the sacrum. Also here, you can see the spinous process of those fused vertebrae, and then the coccyx. The coccyx is the tailbone. Sacrum, coccyx. The final thing, let's see, you need to know the sternum connects the ribs anteriorly. You don't need to know the shoulder or hip for axial. Those are appendicular. The final structure is on a baby skull. Before the bones fuse, when a baby is 18 to 24 months, they are separate. And between them, there is cartilage. And those openings or gaps where there's cartilage and no bone are called fontanelles. You need to know this large fontanelle on the anterior part of the skull. That is the anterior fontanelle.